Welcome to Skinner and Chalmers' Weekly Roast. Today, Dolltastrophe, investigating the mysterious living dolls of Memefield.
Memefield's finest listeners. I'm Seymour Skinner, your principal host, and today we talk about a topic that was suggested by Magpie1862.
And I'm Gary Chalmers, the superintendent who's never superintending anything because we're both off the clock for this podcast.
Indeed. And tonight, my dear Chalmers, we have quite the curious conundrum to discuss.
Oh? And what might that be, Skinner? Your burnt lasagna recipes have been quite the hit, but I'm all cooked out.
But this isn't about my culinary mishaps. It's about the recent string of events involving some most unusual guests at my dinner table. Living dolls, Chalmers. Living dolls.
Living dolls, as in inanimate objects that have sprung to life and are now playfully dodging your colander.
Precisely. And not just any dolls, but a collection of them that seem to have taken up residence around our beloved Memefield.
Skinner, you've had your fair share of, let's call them, culinary anomalies. Are you certain these aren't another one of your dishes come to life?
Certainly. I may have accidentally created a love potion last week, but these dolls are of a different and far more mystifying caliber.
Well then, it seems we have a topic fit for our weekly roast. Let's delve into this peculiar phenomenon and serve up some analysis with a side of humor.
Excellent. And to kick things off, I'll share with you an evening that began like any other. Me trying to perfect my beef bourguignon recipe, and ended with me hosting what felt like the United Nations of toys.
Ah, yes. I remember the night. Well, your kitchen was more chaotic than a kindergarten on sugar rush overload.
Indeed. And it wasn't just the sugar rush, one of those dolls. Let's call her Barbie. Q for now, insisted on helping me with the recipe. Unsurprisingly, the dish was inedible.
I can only imagine the horror. Your culinary creations are a gamble even without sentient kitchen assistants.
True, but this brings us to our first point of discussion. How did these dolls come to be? Did they fall from the sky? Were they mailed in boxes marked, "Do not open"?
Or perhaps a new Memefield startup is behind this, aiming to revolutionize companionship as we know it.
A revolutionary startup that hasn't yet considered the potential for kitchen mishaps. Curious oversight, if you ask me.
Or maybe they're the new pet trend. Instead of a dog or a cat, people are now adopting dolls. Meet Spot. He's programmed to not chew on your shoes.
Imagine the adoption papers. This doll may exhibit signs of sentience and has a tendency to bake unexpected confections, not liable for burnt fingers or cake-covered carpets.
That would be quite the disclaimer, but let's move on to our next point. These dolls, as you well know, have taken on lives of their own. They've been spotted doing everything from jogging in the park to attending local council meetings.
Jogging in the park, you say? I suppose it's healthier than my usual pre-dinner workout, which involves sprinting to the store for that one missing ingredient.
And don't forget their attempt at integrating into society during our neighborhood barbecue. It was quite the sight. Grills being manned by grills, so to speak.
It was a big deviation like no other. Although, I must admit, I did feel a twinge of sympathy for A.L. Bartholomew, who was relegated to the pet skeleton role that day.
Yes, poor Bart. He's been the forgotten pet since those dolls arrived. Even the alligators seemed interested in their silicone scales and synthetic stuffing.
It's a strange new world we live in, Chalmers. One where alligators are gadget enthusiasts. Who could have predicted that?
Well, with all this talk of dolls and bobcats, I'm sure our listeners are eager to know how this affects their daily lives. What does the future hold for Memefield now that we share it with these companions?
Yes, the future. A blur of uncertainty, especially when you consider the potential social implications. Will our children play with a bunch of living dolls who can play back instead of human parents that have little time because of the long work? Will our pets develop a new line of friends?
And what about the cultural impact? Art, entertainment, politics? Will they all be influenced by these living dolls?
But before we dive into that, let's take a moment to address the safety and security concerns.
Ah, yes. After all, when dolls can access your kitchen, where does one draw the line?
Quite the conundrum. And not just for my cooking career. If these dolls can move about Memefield as they please, what measures should we put in place to ensure everyone's well-being?
A valid concern. we must consider the implications thoroughly, perhaps even consult with our resident orb of wisdom, Cosmo, on this matter.
Oh, yes. Cosmo has a knack for predicting these kinds of things, though his advice often comes with a side of cosmic flashbacks.
Cosmo's flashbacks are always enlightening in their own strange way. But let's not forget the cultural significance of this situation. How might these dolls change the way we live, work, and interact with one another?
A profound question indeed. It could lead to a society where empathy for inanimate objects is the norm, or it could be the dawn of a new age of technological advancement.
Or perhaps a blend of both. A world where technology has evolved so much that it can feel, think, and even dine on burnt casseroles.
A world where even the most mundane tasks are performed by our former toys. It's a fascinating thought experiment, to say the least.
And as we ponder these possibilities, we must also consider the future interactions between our doll friends and the rest of Memefield's residents, including Sonic, Shadow, Yugi, Master Chief, and Echo. Clearly, remember the events that have already happened. How will these interactions shape the community? Will there be a doll, human council, or perhaps a Doll of the Month club?
Doll of the Month's club? I can see the pamphlets now. Join today and meet your new best friend, a doll who never judges when you over-season the stew.
That's a generous friend indeed. But let's wrap up this segment with a look at the potential future developments. What do you envision for our beloved Memefield?
Well, Chalmers, I foresee a world where we've adapted to these changes, where living dolls are as commonplace as smartphones. We'll have doll-specific playgrounds, doll dating apps, and perhaps even doll political debates.
A doll dating app? I can already see the headlines. Local doll reportedly turns down date with Skinner over spicy chili con carne incident.
Ah, yes, that infamous chili, a dish best forgotten, but not before making history as the first culinary mishap to bring together a community of living dolls.
Indeed. But seriously, that all sounds totally wrong somehow. I hope there won't be any doll app or other weird doll-related things. People could get the wrong idea with that. And as we look forward to these future developments, let's not forget the lessons we've learned from this peculiar past month. It's been quite the adventure, hasn't it?
It certainly has. From kitchen calamities to neighborhood nuances, our lives have been spiced up. Quite literally. And as we sit here reflecting on the madness, we can only hope that our future interactions will be just as interesting, albeit perhaps a bit less culinarily eventful.
Well said, Skinner. As we wrap up this segment and prepare for our next discussion on the implications of living dolls, I think it's safe to say that Memefield will never be the same again.
No, indeed, Chalmers. But well, enough of the preamble. Let's bring some structure to today's episode. All right, folks, let's dive deeper into this mystery of the living dolls. Now, as your host, I'm no stranger to a good culinary adventure. Maybe I inadvertently conjured these dolls with some ancient recipe I found in a dusty old cookbook.
Oh, you mean when you still had the forbidden book?
Exactly, Chalmers. This book must have turned our entire universe upside down with its delicious vegan recipes.
Oh, yes, Skinner's cooking. The stuff of legend. I can totally see you accidentally summoning demons. Or dolls, in this case.
Well, it's a possibility, Chalmers. I mean, have you seen my kitchen? It's like a science lab gone wrong half the time.
Still, I think it's more likely that these dolls are just a new trend. You know, like those pet rocks from the 70s.
A trend? That's an interesting idea, Chalmers. But these dolls are lifelike. It's not like they have blinking lights or anything. Well, except for maybe their eyes.
Oh, yes, because all lifelike dolls should have glowing red eyes, right? That's completely normal.
You know what I mean. But seriously, if they're a trend, it's one I didn't know about, then I must admit I don't remember seeing anything like this in the latest issue of Vogue Tech.
Skinner, with all due respect, have you looked at the latest issues of Vogue Tech?
Touché, Chalmers. Touché. But let's say these dolls are indeed a trend. What company would be brave enough to create something like this?
Well, we do live in Memefield, Skinner. Anything is possible here. Maybe one of our neighbors is behind this.
True. Our neighborhood is packed with all sorts of characters. Sonic the Hedgehog, Yugi, Master Chief, Echo, and Anna. It's like a comic convention.
Yes, and now we can add living dolls to the list. I can just see Sonic trying to outrun them for fun.
Imagine that, Sonic racing around the neighborhood dodging living dolls. That'd be quite a sight.
Or maybe he's training for an unexpected race.
Oh, Chalmers, you and your jokes. Anyway, back to the subject at hand. These dolls are giving me the creeps, especially with their eerily lifelike appearance.
Well, we'll get to the bottom of this, Skinner. We always do. And remember, even if they are just a fashion trend, it's still a fascinating development for Memefield.
Oh, right. So we're saying these dolls could be the next big thing in fashion or tech. But how did they get here, Chalmers? Did they arrive by mail, a portal? Or maybe they're scouts for an impending invasion?
I doubt it's an invasion, Skinner. More likely, they were delivered by a local company or something. You know how Memefield loves its cutting-edge technology.
Cutting-edge technology? That does make sense. But why deliver them to my house? Am I now the proud owner of an advanced tech showroom?
Only in your wildest dreams, Skinner, although I must admit your living room would be the perfect place for such a display.
Right. Because my living room isn't already full of exotic pets and antique furniture.
Exactly. Just imagine the dolls surrounded by Cosmo, the orb pet, and your collection of rare first edition books. It would be quite the sight.
You really know how to paint a picture, Chalmers. I can just see it now. Cosmo making friends with a lifelike doll.
And no doubt all Bartholomew would be there too, judging all the new guests in your home.
Oh, definitely. He's quite the critic, that one. But let's not forget, this is all hypothetical at this point. We need more information before we jump to any conclusions.
Absolutely, Skinner. We should keep our minds open and gather all the facts before making any rash judgments.
That's the spirit, Chalmers. We'll get to the bottom of this mystery one way or another. And remember, dear listeners, we're here to bring you all the exciting details as they unfold. That said, I remember Sonic, one of our neighbors, mentioned something interesting during our little chit-chat the other day. He heard rumors about an underground cult operating here in Memefield. No, it sounds like the plot of a cheesy sci-fi B-movie.
An underground cult, you say? That's certainly not out of the ordinary for our quirky little town. What did Sonic suggest they were up to?
Well, according to Sonic, this cult might be behind the living dolls. He thinks they could be part of some sort of ritual or experiment.
Rituals and experiments, I'm not sure I buy into all that just yet, Skinner. Why, we need more than just hearsay to make any real claims.
Now, Chalmers. Sonic is a respectable member of this community, just like you and I. His information can't be entirely dismissed.
True. We should certainly take his words into account. But we also need to remember that Sonic is known for his speed and not always for his detective skills.
Well said, Chalmers. Still, it's a lid worth exploring. I mean, if there's a cult behind these dolls, we should know about it. Not that Jim Pickens is visiting us here.
Indeed. But let's not jump to conclusions just yet. We should consider all possibilities before making any assertions on the air.
You're absolutely right. And speaking of our dear neighbor, Sonic, I can't help but wonder if he's noticed anything unusual about these dolls himself.
That's a good point, Skinner. Sonic is always on the move, so he might have picked up on something we haven't.
Right. He could be zipping past these dolls without even realizing it.
That would certainly explain a lot. Although I'm not sure Sonic would appreciate being used as an unintentional intelligence gatherer.
Oh, come on, Chalmers. It's all in good fun. Besides, if there's a cult involved, we might need Sonic's speed to get to the bottom of this.
Well, in that case, I suppose we should draft him into our little investigation team. We can call ourselves the Unlikely Detectives.
Now that's an idea I can get behind, Chalmers. And just think about it. You, me, Sonic, and perhaps even our resident scientist, Professor Frink. That would be quite the team.
The team of superheroes and scientists taking on the mysteries of Memefield. Sounds like a winning combination to me.
But let's not forget Professor Frink's eccentricities. He might have some wild theories of his own about these living dolls.
Oh, absolutely. Frink could either help us solve this mystery or send us down a rabbit hole of nonsensical science.
Either way, it'll be an adventure worth listening to. And in the spirit of full disclosure, we should mention that Frink did once attempt to create a lifelike robot that was indistinguishable from a human.
Ah, yes. That robot was so realistic that it caused quite a stir at the last town fair. People were convinced it was a real person until Frink revealed the secret.
Indeed. So if Frink did create these living dolls, he'd be the perfect expert to consult on this matter.
True, but we should also consider that perhaps these dolls are simply a regular product from one of our local tech companies.
That's a valid point, Chalmers. After all, Memefield is known for its innovative technology.
Exactly. And if that's the case, we might be able to get in touch with the creators directly for more information.
That sounds like a plan, Chalmers. We'll reach out to whoever is behind these dolls and see what they have to say about all this.
Nice thinking, Skinner. It's always good to get the perspective of the creators. Plus, it gives us a chance to learn something new about our own community.
Absolutely, Chalmers. And in the meantime, we'll keep our ears to the ground and our eyes peeled for any unusual activity around town.
That's the spirit, Skinner. We'll get to the bottom of this one way or another. And remember, no matter what we uncover, we'll do it together.
Couldn't ask for a better co-host and friend than you, Chalmers. Let's dive into this mystery and see where it takes us. You know, Chalmers, this whole living doll situation reminds me of an old story from my past. There was this one time I hosted a party and decided to go all out with decorations. I bought these incredibly lifelike dolls as part of the decor.
Oh yes, I remember that party. Your house looked like something straight out of a horror movie. Those dolls were creepily realistic.
Indeed they were, Chalmers. I went to great lengths to make sure every detail was perfect. Little did I know that dolls like those would end up being the talk of the town for weeks to come.
Well, speaking of those dolls, Skinner, do you remember what happened after the party ended? Because it seems like there's a bit of a gap in your memory.
A gap in my memory, Chalmers? Whatever do you mean? I assure you, I have no recollection of any anomalies occurring that night.
Oh, come on, Skinner. Everyone knows that the night ended with you passing out on the couch, surrounded by half-eaten snacks and those same lifelike dolls.
Ah, right. Well, to be fair, I was quite exhausted after all the preparations. And let's not forget the generous amount of wine I had that evening.
Classic, Skinner. Always the gracious host, even in your unconscious state. But back to the present, do you think there's a chance these living dolls are connected to my decorations from that night?
I can't say for certain, Chalmers, but it's certainly an intriguing possibility. Although I must admit, the idea of my old party dolls coming to life is both amusing and slightly terrifying.
Yeah, you might just be the Frankenstein of Memefield, Skinner, bringing life to your decorations in more ways than one.
Now, Chalmers, let's not get carried away with the fantastical ideas. However, it's worth looking into just to rule out any connection.
Absolutely, Skinner. And speaking of connections, we should probably check your attic to see if any of those old dolls are still up there.
The attic, you say? That's going to be a sight to behold, I'm sure. But yes, let's do that. It could provide us with some much-needed answers.
It's the next logical step in our investigation. Plus, it'll give us a good laugh if those dolls are as creepy as I remember them being.
Indeed, Chalmers. It's going to be one for the books. And if these dolls are involved, we'll get to the bottom of it and report our findings to the public.
Oh, I can hardly wait. Imagine the headlines. Memefield's Haunted Dolls, Mystery Solved by Local Heroes.
Now that's a headline I could get used to. But let's not jump ahead of ourselves. We still have a lot of investigating to do before we reach any conclusions.
True. But I must say, this whole situation has certainly added a new layer of intrigue to our usual routine here in Memefield.
It's definitely been an eventful week, that's for sure. And whatever the outcome may be, we can face it together, as always.
That's the beauty of our podcast, Jenner. We face the absurd and the mundane side by side, providing our listeners with a unique blend of entertainment and information.
Indeed, Chalmers. And with that said, let's not forget that we also have a responsibility to our community, to handle this situation responsibly and respectfully.
Of course, Skinner. We wouldn't want to cause any undue panic or distress among our neighbors.
Exactly, Chalmers. We'll report the facts as we know them and encourage everyone to stay calm and informed.
Sounds like a plan, Skinner. So ready for this little adventure in your attic?
Bring it on. We didn't invest in these clips on microphones for nothing.
Skinner and Chalmers, our teapot heroes, make their way to Skinner's attic, past the God Cube and Cosmos spinning session upstairs and straight to the attic. There they are, in the dark, surrounded by dust and a goosebump-inducing environment.
You know, Chalmers, it's been years since we last put up the doll roof decoration. I think it's time we dusted it off for this week's podcast.
Oh, Skinner, that was the year we almost got electrocuted. Do you remember how you thought the lightning rod was part of the display?
Ah, yes. How could I forget? My culinary skills were highlighted that evening when I served burnt popcorn due to a power surge.
Let's not repeat that, especially not on the podcast. Our listeners might start a petition for a less dangerous host.
All right, let's set up here. I always imagined us doing the podcast from the attic with that old-timey feel.
Just as long as we avoid any haunted antique, Skinner. I've had enough of your imaginary friends for one lifetime.
Look at this, Chalmers. It's like stepping into a bygone era. The scent of cedar and forgotten memories.
Or the perfect place for dust bunnies to thrive, Skinner. I see our decorations haven't fared well over the years.
They add character, darling. Now, let's find those elusive decorations. I swear they move every time we look away.
Wait, Skinner, do you hear that?
Hear what? The attic is supposed to be silent, unless we're talking about my collection of rare vinyls.
A strange creaking sound echoes through the attic.
This place is giving me the creeps. I'm serious, Skinner. Something doesn't feel right.
Fear not, Chalmers. My fearless leader instinct kicks in. Let's uncover these decorations and put an end to this mystery.
There they are. Finally, we can get on with the podcast. Skinner, you really should have warned me about your horror movie setup.
My dear Chalmers, where's the fun in a predictable podcast? Besides, you know how much I enjoy a good scare. It's practically a culinary experience for my heart.
Let's not have any culinary experiences today, Skinner. I'm already regretting this decision.
Oh, come on! Just as we're about to begin, the lights flicker. How fitting for our spooky theme.
The lights indeed flicker.
Skinner, that was not part of the plan. I swear if we get electrocuted again.
Calm down, Chalmers. It's probably just Sonic running on his hoverboard downstairs. He always does that right before he uses the hairdryer.
Only in Memefield, Skinner. Now let's focus on the podcast. I don't want to be up here any longer than necessary. And please, no more surprises, Skinner. I'm still not sure I'm fully back on my feet after the last scare.
You have my word, Chalmers. We'll stick to roasting this time, and perhaps I'll save the culinary experiments for dinner.
Now, I have to distract myself from this creepy environment somehow, otherwise I'll have a heart attack. Let's talk about the recent intergalactic recipe competition Yugi hosted.
Ah, yes. That was quite the adventure. I still can't believe Master Chief almost won with his Kana Blast stew.
Can you imagine? A stew so explosive it would make Doc Doc's octopus experiments look like child's play.
Indeed, and let's not forget Echo's attempt at a blizzard berry blast. It was more of a blast from the past with its flavor.
Speaking of blasts, I think our listeners are ready for some of that Skinner and Chalmers magic. Let's give them a show they won't forget.
Agreed, Chalmers. Let the roasting begin. And remember, folks, what happens in the attic stays in the attic, except for this podcast, of course.
They both chuckle and adjust their microphones.
All right, listeners, buckle up because this is going to be a bumpy ride.
And as always, we'll keep the roof doll lights on to ward off any more unexpected guests or imaginary friends.
Right, Skinner? The last thing we need is another horror movie scenario up here.
Fear not, Chalmers. This time I promise. No more living dolls or haunted antiques. Just pure, unadulterated roast.
Yes, well, I'm also sufficiently distracted by this creepy setup up here. We urgently need to muck out.
You know, Chalmers, despite the scare earlier, I'm glad we took on this challenge. It's been quite the adventure.
Absolutely, Skinner. And it's moments like these that make our podcast special, even if it starts with a horror movie set up in the attic.
Indeed, Chalmers. Now let's get downstairs again. No living dolls here, just my old decoration that looks creepy as hell.
Both go back down to the podcast studio.
Well, folks, it looks like we've reached the end of our little investigation into the living dolls mystery. And what have we learned?
Well, Skinner, let's just say that we've found more questions than answers. But hey, that's not uncommon for a mystery this intriguing, right?
Indeed it is, Chalmers. I mean, who needs facts when you have imagination and speculation? Am I right?
Oh, definitely, Skinner. You're like the king of speculation around here.
Hey, that's a compliment. But seriously, it was fun exploring this mystery with you, Chalmers. And I have to say, your logical thinking and fact-checking skills are always appreciated.
Oh, shucks, Skinner. It's just part of the job description for podcast hosts like us.
Oh, yeah! Well, in that case, can you remind me again why we're discussing living dolls on a podcast?
Because Skinner, it's because you suggested it. And have to say, it was quite the wild goose chase.
Yeah, maybe a bit too wild. But hey, at least we had fun with it, right?
That's for sure. Although I still think you might be hiding something from me, Skinner. Maybe there's more to the story that you're not telling us.
Oh no, Chalmers. I assure you, there's nothing going on here but a little friendly banter and speculation.
Yeah, well, we'll see about that, won't we? Maybe next time Skinner will spill the beans.
Oh, no, I don't think so. But hey, if you want to keep investigating, be my guest.
You know what, Skinner? I think we've had enough mystery solving for one day. Let's just wrap this up with a nice story and call it a day.
Agreed. So let me tell you about the time.
Oh, no, Skinner. Not another one of your wild tales.
Ah, come on, Chalmers. It'll just be a little anecdote to leave our listeners smiling.
Fine. But if it's going to be too long or boring, I'm blaming you for the podcast going off track.
Don't worry, my friend. I promise this one will be a quick and amusing tale. And, hey, who knows? Maybe we'll even get some laughs out of our listeners.
Okay. But just remember, Skinner, it's all your fault if the podcast gets derailed.
Will do, Chalmers. Now, let me start.
And that's where we'll leave the story for now. Stay tuned for our next episode when we'll have even more exciting adventures and banter to share. Goodbye, listeners. Wow, I've always wanted to say that. Have a nice day.